Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. It's great that you could join us, and from what I gather, we have some applicants that might be already offer holders, and we might also have some early inquirers as well. So welcome to you all. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. My name is Dr. Claire Pettinger, and I'm a lecturer in public health dietetics, and I'm also the admissions tutor for the dietetics course here at the University of Plymouth. And I'm going to be hosting this first webinar in our series. I would also like to warmly welcome two of our current dietetics students, Neve, who's a second year student, and Janessa is a first year student. And we'll be hearing more from them very soon. And thank you both, students, for giving up your very precious time today because it is assessment period at the moment. So I really do appreciate your time today. So I very much hope you enjoy this short webinar. What we'll be covering today? So we'll be covering a few things. So firstly, we'll be covering what is a registered dietitian. Some of you may already know that, so that will be revision for you. Others may be just finding your way. So we'll be showing a short video clip from the British Dietetic Association to outline what the role of a dietitian is. We'll then be touching on what do registered dietitians do. And this is where I'll provide an outline of our webinar series to show the diversity of expertise in our dietetic team in Plymouth, and also focusing on some of the less traditional and emerging roles for dietitians, which very much shows the variability in the dietitian's role, which is very exciting. But the main focus of this webinar is on the student voice, and I will be asking questions of our current students, our two students who have agreed to be with us today, which I hope will provide you with some insight into the specific student experience of studying dietetics at Plymouth. And you'll then have the opportunity to ask us any questions you might have if they haven't already been covered in what we've spoken about. So I'm going to start by going over the what is a registered dietitian short video. Now, we did have this perfectly functioning and we had a bit of a hiccup at the last minute, so we're now on a YouTube clip. So I'm going to open up this clip and I'll have to move it from one screen to the other, so bear with me while I do that.
Finding accurate information about what you should eat and drink nowadays can be difficult, especially if you have a medical condition. There's lots of information available on the internet, social media and on TV, but not all of it is right, good or true, and not all of it is safe. So where can you go for safe, personalised advice based on the best and most up-to-date evidence? That's what dietitians do. Dietitians are regulated nutrition healthcare professionals trained to translate the complex science of nutrition into easy-to-understand advice that is tailored to you. Dietitians are the only nutrition professionals regulated by law, accountable to the Health and Care Professions Council, and required to maintain their professional competence. This means the advice you will be given will be safe, within your best interest, evidence-based, and honest. Every dietitian completes years of study, as well as clinical experience working in a range of settings to prepare to support you. So how does a dietitian make sure their advice is tailored to you? Dietitians think about so much more than just what you eat and drink. They consider all the factors that influence your diet, your relationship with food, and your wider health and well-being. Dietitians consider your age, gender, physiology, and mental health. They know one size does not fit all. If you have a medical condition, they have the skills to know how your diet will interact with your medications or treatment, and what impact diet may have on your symptoms. They look at culture, taste, and cooking skills, so they don't just recommend food that is good for you, but that you'll want to eat. They take into account your environment, social situation and lifestyle, and your activity levels to provide holistic solutions that take account of the full picture. Dietitians are trained communicators and learn behaviour change techniques to help motivate you to improve your relationship with food. Their training means they can combine all this information with the latest scientific evidence and their own experience and expertise to create advice and treatments that work for you. You might encounter dietitians in lots of different places. They work in the NHS, in hospitals and GPs' practices, as well as in the community and visiting patients in their homes. They also deliver public health services to the population at large. They also work in the private sector, helping clients to improve their diet or manage a health condition. And they work with industry and manufacturers to influence the food and drink we buy in the shops or eat in restaurants. Research dietitians ensure that we have the latest evidence on food and diet, and teach and train the next generation of dietitians, doctors, nurses, and other health professionals. They work with top sports stars to help them achieve their goals. And you'll see dietitians on TV and in the media too, helping sort the fact from the fiction and improving everyone's understanding of nutrition science. Dietitians do much more than you might realise.
So what we saw in that short video was that dietitians do not just think about food and diet, they also consider people's relationship with food, the wider determinants of health and well-being, age, gender, social aspects, cultural aspects, everything to do with food. So this is a broad and complex array of aspects that dietitians are thinking about. So they're key practitioners, health practitioners, in a range of different settings. Now, when we think about dietitians and the different settings in which they work, we heard in that short video clip as well that there's a massive different range of places and settings that dietitians might work, from hospitals to primary care settings and other settings such as schools, communities and care homes, from research and education to the food industry, from public health to media influences, and from gut health experts to sustainable diets and food systems. So what an exciting career you have chosen that lies ahead of you. The future of dietetics looks bright, embracing technology, exploring different ways of working and creating new opportunities. And here at Plymouth, we have been spearheading innovations on some of the emerging, less traditional roles for dietitians. We have staff engaged in research and practice in the areas of primary care, long-term conditions, nutrition and frailty, the role of nitrate in management of blood pressure, nutrition for dementia, food systems and sustainability. And we also are educational experts on and innovators as well, working on communication techniques for dietitians, using digital media for communicating messages, virtual placements and clinics. And of course, this webinar series is an opportunity for us to showcase some of these exciting areas of our research and practice. Anyway, more about that later. I think let's get on to the subject of this current webinar. Hopefully I've provided you with enough information, a little bit of background about what is a dietitian and what registered dietitians do. And now we're going to hand over to our wonderful students. We have Janessa and Neve with us. Now, do we want to just say, Janessa, do you want to start just by introducing yourself very briefly?
Yeah, sure, I can do. So hi everyone, I'm Janessa and I'm a first year student in Plymouth and I'm from Malaysia. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Janessa. Neve?
Hi, I'm Neve. I'm a second year dietitian. I'm from Wales.
Okay, fantastic. So what we've decided to do, and this was discussed between us, we decided we would do this kind of like a bit of a Q&A session with the students. So it's a bit of a live interview I'm conducting with the current students. And they've already introduced themselves, and I'm going to ask the students 5 questions each. They'll be asked the same question and each will give their specific experiences. And then we'll see how that pans out, and then towards the end I'll say a little bit more, and then you'll get the opportunity to ask any questions of either me or the students, and we'll see how long that takes us. Okay, are we all ready to go then? Right, I'm going to start with the first question. Right, so the first question I'm asking here is, what made you want to be a dietitian? I think I'm going to ask Janessa first, if that's okay.
So I have been really interested in food and cooking and eating food, of course, since when I was young. So I wanted to study and major in something related with food, the science of food, and I learned about being a dietitian, which was helping people build the relationship, a positive one with food, and helping them with their health with food. So that was what I was inspired to be a dietitian.
Excellent. Thank you, Janessa. That's great. Neve, how would you answer that question?
Sorry, before I answer, Claire, would you like to mute yourself? Because I think we echo when we answer our questions.
Yeah, that's a good point. I will, so I'll mute now.
So the reason I wanted to be a dietitian is very similar to Janessa. I always had a passion for food. I've been cooking with my grandparents and my mum since I was young, and decided to take catering for GCSE. And in that, we had to do a module on nutrition, which just grew my fascination with food and like the science behind it and like how food is made up of all these different nutrients. And with that, it just made me want to do something with the science base. And then I always liked to care for people in the hospital industry and clinical side of things. So I did a bit of research and I came across nutrition, and then I came across dietetics, which was directly linked and a lot more chance to do clinical based work. And it just basically chose me and I chose it together. So that was the reason I wanted to be a dietitian.
Fantastic, and we are very lucky to have you both. I will add to that. So thank you. That's the response to the first question. Okay, moving on to question 2 then. Hold on, I'm just waiting for my slide to move. What drew you to Plymouth? And I think I'll maybe start with Neve this time. I'll mute myself. Neve, what drew you to Plymouth?
So the dietetic course, there's quite a few different ones about the UK. So I was looking for one with placements because there are few with placements and few without. So Plymouth was one of the ones with placements, and I went to an open day not really knowing much about the area, and I just really felt at home, and it was like home away from home straight away. And that feeling just makes you want to go there. And the city is very central, very everything you need is right there, and especially with the university central as well. And then on the outskirts, you got the seaside. So it's like your breath of fresh air away from uni. And just those two contrasting places just basically chose Plymouth for me.
Fantastic. Yeah, it is quite a spectacular place. And of course, we've got the moor as well that you can escape to as well if you want to go up that other side. Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Neve. Janessa, what drew you to Plymouth?
So I wanted to come to UK to study dietetics, and I also did some research on the universities that gave the dietetic course, and I looked at Plymouth and I realized that Plymouth gave placement options which was really wide and diverse. They had community settings and clinical settings, which was a lot for me to choose. And I learned that they also had a lot of experimental labs, which was good for the clinical settings and researching. So it was really interesting for me, and I learned something about Plymouth, that it was a sea city, and I really liked the sea, and I liked sports on the sea as well. So that was absolutely my first choice for learning here.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, and hopefully the weather's been reasonable for you since you've been over here, because I know the weather plays quite an important role. So yeah, the great responses, and I'm obviously very biased. I've lived in this part of the world for quite a long time, and it's just such a fantastic place. It's a really buzzing, vibrant city, and the university offers some excellent opportunities. So thank you. Right, so let's move on to question 3, which is more about academic and learning. So I'm just very slowly moving. So the next question then is, tell me about your lectures and learning. Now, this is an interesting one, and I think we have to be current here, because I think the situation this year for everybody who's listening has been very, very different than than what we've seen in previous years. And I would just like to start, before we ask this question or ask the students to respond, by saying how impressed I have been by how well the students have responded to this unprecedented COVID situation, which has necessitated mainly online learning. So I guess I'll go over to the students to kind of reflect on their experiences. Janessa, do you want to start by telling me about your experience from a first year perspective, about your lectures and learning so far?
Yep, so I have been in Plymouth for like 5 months now, and because of the COVID situation, most of the classes are online and only a few of them are face-to-face lectures. So for the online lectures, I would say that the tutors have really put in a lot of effort for making us to be interactive, because they used a lot of interactive tools like Miro boards and breakout rooms, which was very useful for us to meet our friends, not face to face but online. So it's quite new and interesting to study like this. But I would say that it was quite a good experience.
Okay, thank you. That's always good for us to know as well. It's been challenging for us all, but that's great. Thank you, Janessa. Neve, can you reflect on your experience, please, of your learning and lectures? Thanks.
Yeah, so you commended us on, but I think I commend all the lecturers as well, because it's really difficult to hold captive the attention of 30 plus students over Zoom, when you've just got a couple of slides and your face on camera. It's difficult. So all the lecturers have tried really hard, putting in extra effort, like Janessa said, with like Miro boards and breakout rooms, just small little details that really improve learning, for us. And personally for me, I really like in those little sort of polls and little questions, just making sure that they know what we know and we know what we know. So it's just that little tick box at the end of each lecture. And then comparing it to my first year, which was in person mostly until March, there is not that much difference in how much we are taught. They don't cut down on what we're taught. They're still trying to keep everything basically the same, which is really, really good. So I believe the lecturers have tried really hard to keep that balance of learning, and also the breaks in between lectures have been the same. So it's been really good.
Thank you, Neve. That's very kind words, and it's always good. I think it's good for all of us to receive feedback. It's been a challenging time for everybody, but I think we work very closely together, and I think for those listening, it's this is a two-way flow. We're all adults, and we do our best to support each other, and I think that's that's been why we've had kind of success in what we've tried to do. So yeah, great. Thank you for that response. So we'll move on to question 4. Let me just move on my slide. So the next question is around placement learning. So I'm going to direct this predominantly at to Neve, because she's done her placement. But I think just before I ask Neve this question, Janessa, I think you did have a short placement session, just talking about your future placement. I don't know if you have anything you want to reflect on briefly about that before Neve maybe says a little bit more about her placement experience.
Yeah, sure. So I haven't done any placements yet, but I did have a session where our placement tutor gave us a lecture about that, a session about that. So there are really a lot of placements that the university is working with, the hospitals and communal settings, and they are not only based in Plymouth but also the other parts of London, of UK as well. Sorry, so it's quite there's a lot of places and areas that you can choose from, And so that is very free, I would say. You can choose. Of course, you might not be able to get the first one that you want, but there's a chance of you getting that. So that is what I'm like looking forward to. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Janessa. And we'll maybe reflect in a year's time, you'll maybe have more reflection to make on placement. Neve, would you like to say a little bit about your placement experience so far?
Yes. So we were, as first years back in the summer, we were supposed to have a 2-week sort of introductory placement, which would be shadowing predominantly. So due to COVID, it was cut. So we've just had a virtual placement week, which was really interesting, with a number of different online activities which were self-directed, and then also sort of a couple of hours online virtual placement within trusts. So that would be possibly some group meetings, MDT meetings, which is multidisciplinary meetings, or it could be appointments with service users and a dietitian, or it could be sort of diabetic like groups that come together to discuss sort of different plans. I know that there's one called Daphne. So my insight, so I did a anorexia and bulimia illness sort of center, and I got to watch the MDT meetings and then also see how they discuss with the service users. So it was really insightful, and I'm looking forward to my B placement, which takes place this summer. And then you have your C placement in the third year just after Christmas. So it's 3 placements and you get 1 each year.
Fantastic, thank you. And you know, just for those listening, you know, we have, I think the placement learning has probably been the most challenging thing to manage during the COVID pandemic era. But our placement team, we've got a fantastic placement lead, Louise Mole, who is doing one of the webinars later on. I think it's the June date. I'll say a little bit more about that later, but she'll be talking about virtual placements, because actually through the very difficult, challenging experiences, we have actually been able to innovate and come up with some great new ideas around simulation and those virtual placements. So actually, you know, it's not all been a real challenge. It's actually presented a lot of opportunities for us. So it's not all bad. So it's trying to see the opportunity in the face of difficulty, really, that we've tried to respond to. So that's great. Thanks there. So I'm going to move on to question 5, which is about the year group and the size. So we've got how many students are in the year group, and kind of, I guess, from a student perspective, how that's managed. So do you want to say a little bit about, I'm just wondering if we might start with Neve in the second year, Neve, and then we'll move on to Janessa.
So in my year group, there is 37 of us. There is a point where you can do second year entry. So there was 36, gone up to 37 as when individual joined us. So it is a relatively small group compared to other university courses. And I think that has a lot of benefits, because it means that your group and your cohort is a lot more sort of close, and you get to know everyone. Everyone gets to know each other's strengths, and helping each other is really important. And it also means that you get more interaction with your lecturers and your lecturers, because there is a fewer number, which means more contact between you and a lecturer. And it's just nice to have that group. And then we also can be split up into smaller groups to get to know each other even more, but you do know everyone within your cohort before getting split up into those smaller groups, which just sort of eases that first conversation. You do know them before those smaller groups.
Excellent, thanks Neve. Yeah, I think that is one of the things that I would confirm, is that, you know, it's a small group compared to standard university courses, so we do get to know you very well, and I suppose that means that we know if you're not there as well, so it can work both ways, really. But yeah, I think as Neve has said, you can get to work in your full cohort groups or smaller groups within that cohort. And of course, and Janessa might be able to reflect this, some of the learning is in other faculty groups that are much bigger groups. So Janessa, do you want to just say a little bit about your experience of the size of your cohort?
So for the first years, we have a bit more, around 45, something like that. And for most of our modules ongoing now, we also have nutrition master students who are joining us. So it's a bit of a bigger group, but still it's not as big as the other courses in the university. And I agree with Neem on the interactions between other students, as I would say that most of us know who we are, and we do talk like even after classes and lectures. Um, Before the lockdown, some of us did have a chance to get around together and do our courseworks together, which was really nice because we get to know each other. And because that we are in smaller groups of people, so for our personal tutors in this section, I would say it's more focused. The tutors have less duties, and it's good because I have my experience is that because we have fewer people, so that we can have our own personal problems solved, like in more detail, because like the tutor doesn't have to get along with too much people. Yeah.
Thanks, Janice. And that final point about personal tutoring, I suppose, is quite an important one, because um, having a smaller cohort, even so for those listening, this year's cohort was larger, and we took 45 students, and it looks like moving forward we will be continuing to take that number of students. It's still a relatively small group compared to some of the larger courses like psychology. They've got about 200 students, even 300 some, and nursing have got hundreds of students. So it means that you do get more one-to-one support available should you need it. Now, not all our students need that one-to-one support, but each student on the course is allocated a personal tutor for the duration of the 3 years of the course, and it's our responsibility to kind of support your, just to get to know you, support your pastoral, your academic progress. And throughout this last term, we've been very careful to make sure that we're, supporting and keeping in touch with our students more regularly, perhaps than we would have done previously, just because because of the social isolation during lockdown, etc. So yeah, that's something. Thanks for your response to that question. So the next question, and this was thought up by our students themselves, is, what was your image of a dietitian when you started the course, and has this evolved? So I think I might ask Janessa first for response to this one.
So before starting the course in the university, my idea of a dietitian was more on counsel. The job of a dietitian was being a counseling role, and like they would prescribe perhaps some medicines or like diets that we should have. And after starting the course, based on my knowledge, it has evolved that it is a very diverse roles, because I know that in many settings we need dietitians, their help in their professionalism, and such as in clinics and hospitals, they work together with their co-workers, such as the doctors and hospitals, to give the patients a more well-rounded treatment. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Janessa. Neve, do you want to respond to that question, please?
Yeah, so a big turn of events for myself just prior to starting the course in Plymouth. I got diagnosed with celiac disease, which many dietitians learn about on the course, and also are involved in the treatment of it. So it's intolerance of gluten, and it just meant that I got to see the progress of myself becoming a dietitian on the course, and then also interact as a service user, talking to dietitians that are fully qualified. So I think my involvement and my image of a dietitian developed a lot quicker because I was going through two stages at the same time, being a service user and sort of developing my skills. And sort of prior to that, I did know about the job as both my parents are in the healthcare industry. So I had met a few dietitians. But again, like Janessa said, I think it was more clinical and just sort of discussing diet. And now being on the course, I understand that there is a lot more sort of empathy and emotion and discussing and getting to know the person and then solving the problem, because it can affect the lifestyle and how someone deals with it is very different.
Oh, that's fantastic, Neve. Thank you for sharing that. And I think, that personal lived experience is so important. And not everybody necessarily has that, but I think it's, if you're prepared to share that, and I would appeal to some of the applicants who may already have offers and those who may be considering applying, that do feel that sharing your own experience, not all the nitty-gritty of it, but just if you've had an experience of perhaps a relative or a friend who's suffered from some sort of condition that perhaps has required the input of a dietitian, then that's a really, really good thing to illustrate how you understand what a dietitian does and some of the diverse roles. So thank you for sharing that, Neve. And I think, we all have experience of food and eating, maybe not necessarily in the clinical environment. So again, if you're looking for ideas for your personal statement, then you're a passion for food and nutrition and an interest is a very good starting point. So thanks for sharing your responses to that question. So we've got two more questions left, and then we'll open the floor to kind of wider questions from people, if people want to ask. So the next question is about professionalism. Now, this is one, I'm just asking, what do we know about professionalism? Now, I know Janessa, being in first year, is going to reflect on one of her modules, and I think Neve is possibly going to mention registration. So I'll maybe start with your experience, Janessa. Would you like to reflect on your professionalism module briefly? Thank you.
So the first module we had in the first year was about professionalism, and this module was a module for 5 different professions, I think, including optometry, dietetics, and physiology, if I'm not mistaken. And a lot of lectures were there, and they gave us lectures on what is a professional and how to be professional and things like that. And I would say that from what I've learned is that professionalism is an attitude, and it's like showing a professional attitude is being respectful not only to our service users but also to ourselves and our own profession. For example, as being a dietitian, we have to be respectful to our own profession, and because of our own respect, the public would give us their trust, and because we have the knowledge and we are trained to be as such of the professionals. So it's quite important to have the professionalism sense in our own.
And from what I gather, Janessa, you did extremely well in that essay. Yes.
Thank you.
Neve.
So if you seen the course on the Plymouth website, you will know that, or you might not know, but it you get accredited and you register. So it's the BDA, which is the British Dietitian Association, and the HCPC. So these two play a key role in becoming a registered dietitian. So the BDA, the association, is there as a platform for all dietitians to sort of join once they get registered, to share knowledge, to just sort of, it's a community really, to students are welcome as well, just to find the new research and new knowledge around the dietetic sort of field. And the HCPC is the registration that dietitians and all healthcare professionals must sign on to basically hold you accountable, but to protect you and to protect service users, to make sure that everything is sort of above board and that everyone is taken care of in the correct manner.
Fantastic, thank you. Yes, so very well outlined. So, and just to kind of add to that, our the curriculum of our course and all the dietetic courses across the UK are obviously governed by the kind of quality of curricula that are kind of accountable, I guess, to the Healthcare Profession Council, and we're also responding to the BDA curriculum review. And in fact, it's interesting that the British Dietetic Association has only recently reviewed its curriculum. So we all, as professionals registered with the Healthcare Profession Council, we all had the opportunity to feed into that process, and that was a very interesting process. So we're very current. And we're accredited both with the BDA, and when you finish your course, you will be eligible to register as a dietitian with the Healthcare Profession Council. So we're moving on to our final question now, which relates more to life outside the university, because we know it's not all about studying. And it's really important that you've got that balance between your study and things outside the university, although we appreciate that the current period is not the best period to necessarily be reflecting on. But nonetheless, we've got some great reflections on this. So the final question is, what about life outside your studies? Are there any clubs and societies available? So Janessa, do you want to start here, please? Thanks.
So because of COVID, I would say that a lot has changed, and there's not a lot of selection for me to do because there are limitations from the governments. So, but I would say that my life is still very interesting for myself because I have been exploring Plymouth with my friends from the university, and there's also the support teams from the school and our faculty is very heartwarming and helpful for me because I was not able to go back home for Christmas and all, so I had to stay in a host in the university, and they gave out gifts and they had a lot of activities for students who are staying here for Christmas, so there was a lot of support from them. And in terms of clubs and societies, there's a wide range of from sports to the sports activities and those from other countries as well. Like for me, I've been in the Malaysian society, and I know that there's also a nutrition society.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Janessa. And I do, it's great to hear that you received the support you needed over that Christmas period, because it was difficult for people not being able to move and travel during that period. So well done for sticking that out. Niamh, can you respond and maybe say a bit more about the Nutrition Society?
Yes. So as Jess said, there is a nutrition society. So it's the Food and Nutrition Society, which was started last year by some of the students doing nutrition and exercise, and myself and a few others from the dietetic course. So we came together to possibly start up a society for those who have a passion about nutrition or want to learn more. And sort of come together. So we started that last year, and as of this year, I've become chairperson. So it's run by myself and a few others. So this year, with difficulty because of COVID, but we have held pretty regular society meetings, which have been done all over Zoom. So they have consisted of pub quizzes, which is very regular for societies at the moment, but they're very much fun. And also Q&As with various lecturers and other dietitians and nutritional professionals to get to know them and why they chose the career and chose that pathway. as there is a lot of particular areas of dietetics and nutrition that you can go into. So it's a great insight into why that individual chose that area. And then also some cooking tutorials and cooking sort of competitions done over social media. And we just had our Christmas bake competition, which was won by one of the first years on the dietetics course. So we have been keeping busy and hopefully do more this year, but when there's not COVID, hopefully that'll be soon, but there is so much more to do in Plymouth.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Niamh, for all the work that you've done to keep that going, because I think it's been a little lifeline for a lot of people, just having that point of reference and checking in and having a little bit of a laugh in these very kind of dark days at times. So well done, real credit to you for running that. So what I'm going to do just briefly before we move on to questions, it's just a reminder really of what we're doing here at Plymouth. You know, we're all about food and nutrition. We're nurturing knowledge about food and nutrition, raising awareness of the relationship between nutrition and health, utilising scientific research to inform treatment and prevention of health conditions. Now, why Plymouth? You come to Plymouth, we've got state-of-the-art clinical facilities. Now, this webinar hasn't given us the opportunity to talk about. We do have a new building in the pipeline, and we can say more about that on a separate occasion, but that's a very exciting development. In the next couple of years, we will have a purpose-built new decorated building. Our staff team are actively engaged in cutting-edge nutrition research and teaching, and that's really important when you're choosing where to study. And we're constantly evolving and developing what we offer. So placements in a range of clinical and community settings. At the moment, I'm working with the placement team to try and develop more on the way of public health placements, as an example, so that we can kind of build our placement capacity. So it's a constant moving, very exciting opportunity of what we offer here. So just before we move on to questions, I just want to say that here is a table of the different webinars that we're offering over the coming months. The next webinar being offered is on Wednesday, the 24th of February, which is Professor Mary Hickson. Now, Mary Hickson is our Professor of Dietetics in the team here at Plymouth, and she's going to be talking about her own research, and Avril Collinson's research around the future dietitian, and will also be reflecting on some of the research experiences of the current team. I'll be then talking about sustainable diets and food systems. Avril Collinson will be covering primary care dietitians. Tracy Parkin will be covering the prevention and management of long-term conditions. And then Louise Mole in June will be talking about virtual placements. So please do keep an eye out for future webinars. We are recording them all, so if you miss it, you should be able to catch up again. So I very much hope you've enjoyed the student voice webinar. And what I would like to do now is really open the floor for any questions you might have. Now, I'm not pressuring anybody to ask questions. And what I suggest you do is either you post a question in the chat box, which I can read out, or if you're brave and you want to actually unmute yourself and ask a question, then this is the opportunity to do that. So, and if I don't have any response, that's fine. There's absolutely no pressure. We may have answered all your questions. So does anyone have any questions?
I think someone put their hand up.
Nick's got his hand up, I think.
Hi, it's Nick. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
yes, I can hear you fine.
Thanks, good. Thank you everyone for that. Claire, Niamh and Janessa, it's really interesting to hear your experiences of the course. I've got some quite specific questions. I might follow up with you, Claire, afterwards rather than take time on this call. But one of my questions was just around the course. I've had a look on the website in terms of its delivery structure, but you talked obviously this year about the challenges of having to do things a bit more remotely and flexibly. Well, next year, hoping by September we have a degree of sort of normality back, will you sort of return to the sort of previous face-to-face format, or are you likely to keep some of the online nature of the course that you've sort of developed this year?
It's a very good question, and I mean, from a personal experience, I miss the face-to-face contact so much, and I think the blended learning is only filling the gap, as far as I understand. There may be some online lectures still happen, but I would suggest that everything will go back to normal, pretty much, give or take a few sessions that might lend themselves better to being delivered in an online manner. So I think for now we can assume, we don't know what's happening in the future. We have to be prepared for every eventuality, and this is all about being responsive and adaptable. We now consider ourselves quite expert at delivering things online, but we're also very well experienced over the years for delivering face to face. So and that shift and the change, the transition, we've had to transition things to deliver online very quickly. And the teams behind the scenes, timetabling, etc., managing that, all the outreach, everybody has managed that extremely well. So I can't make any guarantees to you here now, but I would like to think that everything will be back to normal. It might look slightly different, but I would hope that the majority of teaching would be back to face. Hopefully that answers your question.
Claire, yes, can I say something else?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this answered your question, but I know the university has gone to sort of a structure of having Monday, Tuesdays and Thursdays in person. Well, those are the core teaching days. So generally in the first year, those are the days you'd be expected to be on campus or learning. So I'm not sure if that helps, but that is the structure, and that's majority what we've had this year, even with online learning, and just with a couple of different modules. You might be expected to do a couple of sessions on Wednesdays and Fridays. So it's not for all the year, but majority of the year you would have at least the Wednesday afternoon off and a Friday.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and I think there was another question that came through the chat function about the workload. Now, we may have partially responded to that because, like Niamh said, the timetabling footprint means that the majority of timetable, whether it's online or face-to-face, is Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, leaving you time for catch-up, study, work, childcare on Wednesdays and Fridays, apart from the odd session that is required on a Wednesday and Friday where it can't be fitted in elsewhere. In terms of workload, I would probably suggest very briefly, I appreciate we're quite short of time now. It would maybe be nice to hear from our students for this one. Niamh, do you want to say a little bit about the transition from first year into second year, perhaps at this point, in terms of workload?
So the workload has changed because we have sort of weekly sort of tasks to complete. These aren't heavy. They don't expect you to do massive amount of work per week, because they do understand that there are other things that need to be done for deadlines and things. But we do a module which is sort of a case-based module. So we'll get a couple of questions about an individual, which will require some research done by individuals in the group, and then we come together. These are usually our face-to-face lectures. We come together and we discuss what research we have and how that would apply to that individual, sort of developing our knowledge on how to sort of pull out these questions from service users to develop how we would respond to what they have, to see what sort of condition they may have.
Yeah, and I think just in a nutshell, for the question about workload, which came through the chat box, the first year is generally a kind of the background in science, genetics, physiology, all those kind of background sciences with nutrition and those key kind of backbone subjects. And then in your second year, you really get into the nitty-gritty of dietetics. You're still working alongside pathophysiology, immunology, etc. And all the modules are aligned to fit with those dietetic modules. So year two, I would probably argue, Niamh, maybe you could agree or not with this, is probably, it requires a lot more kind of organizational skills, because you're your topics are unfolding quite regularly, and you very much have to keep on top of things. So whereas from my reflections of my personal duties, quite often students might feel that they have enough time to have a job and do extra things in first year, that perhaps becomes a little bit more challenging in second year. It has been known, we've had students work throughout all 3 years and manage to fit it in and support their finances that way. Niamh, do you have any kind of reflections on what I've just said? Does that agree with what your experience is?
Yeah, and I was just going to answer the question that seems to be on the chat. I think it's directed at me and Janessa about considering masters or going straight into a band 5 role. Personally, I would like to experience the job straight away, but I do have plans on doing masters. But it depends. I've always wanted to go into paediatrics, and I know there's a paediatrics masters held at Plymouth. But you do have to be in a paediatric dietitian role in order to complete those tasks on that masters. So it's sort of unfolding over the years, but I do want to go straight into band 5 role. Janessa, what are your thoughts, or do you not have any?
Well, I would say I might considering getting a master's course before getting into any jobs first. And we have discussed these questions with other course mates before, and it's quite diverse of their answers. Some really want to continue, and some would want to start straight away, because after enrolling in, you would realize that dietetics you can also be a very focused subject area dietitian, which might be like pediatrics dietitian or like anything involved with other sectors of your bodies and parts. So if I would say that if you have already had a really specialized area that you would want, perhaps you would go directly for the job, or else some of the people in my year would say that they would like to continue their studies first before deciding. But I think that depends on yourself mostly. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really good. I mean, from my reflection of knowing what our previous students have gone on to do, I would probably argue that the majority of students will go straight into a band 5 role. And I mean, our employability level is extremely good. So if you're considering a change of career and you're very much going into a career where you can be pretty much guaranteed work, if you choose to work for the NHS, 70% of dietitians work for the NHS and 30% work in some of those different areas, and we feel that 30% may well expand and there'll be more people going into other kind of opportunities. But we also do have a lot of students that go into further study, some of them straight from their undergraduate degree straight into a master's. We've had students going on to do a clinical research masters. We've had students that have come back a few years later, as Niamh said, to follow our paediatric masters program once they're working as paediatric dietitians. So quite often our students come back a few years later to study with us. And we are, we have a human nutrition masters, which is not related to dietetics, although the students quite often share some of the teaching. There's also an advanced professional practice master's program that the School of Health Professionals offers, which is for people again who have practiced for a little bit longer. So there's a lot of opportunities, and if you are interested in further studies, then we can always support you with what the right pathway may be for you. So hopefully that answers some of your questions. Do we have any? I know we're almost pretty much on 5 o'clock. Does anyone have any other questions or comments? If you want to leave any comments in the chat, this is the first webinar that we've done of the series, and it would be really useful just to have a couple of words of feedback as to whether you found it useful. Was there anything you thought was particularly interesting, or anything that maybe we could have touched on more? Any comments would be more than welcome from you. And what I will say, my email address is on this last slide. I'm the admissions tutor. I'm more than happy. In my view, there's no such thing as a silly question. Whatever situation you're in, whether you're an offer holder, whether you're inquiring and you're not quite sure whether it's the right thing for you, do get in touch. I'm always happy to offer advice to future students, applicants, inquirers, etc. So please do get in touch, and I hope you found that useful. And I would just like to say thank you very much to Niamh and Janessa for sharing their insights and giving up their time to share their insights. So someone's saying that we've covered everything, and thanks for organising. Really interesting. Well, that's really good feedback, folks. Thank you. And we have recorded it, so hopefully we'll have this posted and we'll be able to share it at a future date. Niamh, Janessa, do you have anything finally you want to share?
No, I don't.
No. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I think we can probably stop the recording now.